Okay, everybody, Stevie Key. I'm back, and I've got a very special guest all the way from London. Is that where you're from? Outside London.
Yes, just outside London.
And you
Yep.
pronounce your name Deej, D-E-E-J, Deej?
That's absolutely right. It's an absurd name. I got it at primary school, and even the teachers called me Deej at primary school, and it's stuck ever since. There's no point me trying to change it now.
Okay.
I'm stuck with it, even though it's absurd.
Well, I'm really happy to do this interview. In fact, I'm really excited about it because when I started doing some research on you and your books and what you're trying to do to help us inventors, I knew I had to be the one. Okay. All right, I have to set this up for everybody. Now, I know all you inventors, you're watching this and you're thinking, I'm creative. I come up with a lot of ideas. That's why I'm watching this channel. I don't need to know how to be more creative. I don't need to know anything about this creative process because I've got a lot of ideas. All right. You don't understand this. I can tell you. Because if you're thinking that way, you're thinking about it the wrong way. Now, I know from experience that I mentioned to you earlier before we started this interview, I'm not a creative person. You know, I didn't do any creative things in elementary school or junior high or high school. I took my first art class just in college just because I was hating economics. And I found that I loved working with my hands, but I wasn't creative at all. And I just went home. I told my dad, hey, I want to be an artist. And my dad was the type of guy that says he let me jump off the cliff. I love him. I didn't know at the time how brave he was. Forget how brave I was. But he said, go ahead, jump. So, Deej, now you teach people, you teach inventors how to be more creative. But here's what I want to dig into. Inventors think they're creative already now.
Yeah.
Why do they need to know how to be more creative? Explain that to me.
That is an excellent question, and I think you kind of alluded to it in your talk there. I think that's exactly right. A lot of people think they are creative people, and my experience of people who feel naturally creative is that they don't have techniques and they don't have reliable habits on which they fall back because they think they are naturally creative. So why would they bother to learn any of the theory or any of the practice or any of the discipline of a system of creativity? They don't need that until they need that. And at the point when they need it, they got nothing, which is why you hear very often in falsely romantic terms about people being blocked creatively. I'm not able to finish my book. I can't do this. I can't do that. And people that get creatively blocked tend to be people that are relying on a gift of creativity, some ability to be creative, but have never mastered the skills of creativity. Because as you know, as a professional inventor, if somebody comes to you and says, I need an answer to this problem, I need a solution, I need a ball game, whatever it is, and I need it by the end of the week, you can't sit back and hope that the muse visits.
Oh, no. I'm going to wait for inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't wait for inspiration because inspiration is not necessarily working on your schedule. It's coming when it's coming. And that's not to say that there is no epiphany. That's not to say that you can't have a eureka moment and all the illusion and romance of creativity comes to the fore in those moments. But stories about the fella leaping out of the bath and shouting eureka and Einstein and Newton and the apple on his head, all of those things that seem to come in great flashes of inspiration. The stories are well told, they're tremendously edited, and they're very oversaturated. Okay. The Newton's theory of gravity, first of all, the apple never fell on his head, but he saw the apple fall, and it was years before he published his theory. He wasn't sitting there having an apple that, you know what, I got it. Gravity, well, I'm into it. It's a very disciplined mind, working and toiling and working with it.
Yeah, people don't realize that this creativity, you have to kind of channel it. You have to be able to call upon it. I mean, if you truly want to be successful at being creative repeatedly, I think it's being consistently come up with ideas and do it for a living. If you're an inventor, you want to do this for a living, you have to find a way to call upon that creativity at will. You have to be in control of it. You have to be able to call upon it because you have deadlines, you have goals, you have to be able to hit certain milestones in order to be successful at being creative. So is that what
Yes,
we're really
exactly.
talking about, is how to fine tune that? It's
Yes. And the way I tend to look at creativity, I mean, a lot of people will say it's like a muscle and it needs exercising and building, and which I think is a very useful analogy. I tend to explain it as being like a habit. Anybody can have a good idea once, and God knows we're surrounded by people who've had one good idea. And those people very often are too in love with that one idea. Makes it very difficult to let go, makes it very difficult to get great feedback. I can see you're laughing from horrible experience. But that's it. That's the trouble. If you've got one idea and only one idea, people tend to be so attached to that one idea, and no amount of feedback will dissuade them from the fact that they think they've got a great idea. Well, they might, but they haven't got an idea that's right for the person to whom they're pitching, because if it was right, they wouldn't be getting feedback.
got it.
They would be getting a deal. So the number one secret to having a great idea, and I think this is Edison's quote, isn't it, is to have thousands of ideas, to have a lot of ideas. And that requires a creative habit to constantly be able to come up with ideas, to continually be saying to yourself, how does this relate? How is this relating? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And get into a habit of using techniques that make you more creative.
Yeah, I used to tell my wife that for me, it was like having an apple tree in the backyard, and those apples were ideas, and I could go and pluck that tree anytime I wanted an idea. And that's the way I kind of looked at it. I was in control of my creativity. So, and I've always told everybody, I was an idea factory. I mean, I had to come up with not hundreds but thousands, and do that regularly. It's a discipline. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I do, and maybe you could tell me some of the things that you're talking about, because I know you write about it, you have books about it. So for me, I played games. Okay. And one of the games I played, I have a product that I licensed called the Michael Jordan Wall Ball. It's an indoor Nerf basketball game, because I'm tall, I love playing basketball, and I noticed that, James is going to put it up here on the screen in just a minute. I noticed that the backboard that I bought was square. They should be square. That's a basketball backboard. And it had this little picture of Michael Jordan, and it was really teeny. And Michael Jordan, to me at the time, was my hero.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, and these are the games I played. I said, well, why does that backboard have to be square? And why does it have to be plastic? Why does it have to be in a box? And why isn't Michael big? So I went ahead and took a poster, cut it out of Michael, put it on the backboard, and I called it, here it is right here, I'm going to grab it real quick. And I...
Okay, great, look at that.
Those were the games that I played. I says, why? Why is that? Why does it have to be that way? And it sold for 10 years. And it was just a simple playing a game of why, and changing materials. And what I would do, I would go down to get the visuals and look at things. And I had some other basketball ideas with the hippo, that the backboard was a hippo and this net was the mouth that you threw food in. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, love it. Yeah. Right.
So that was one of the games that I played, and maybe easy. It was easy for me because I could play those games with anything then. I'm wondering, why does it have to be that way?
Yes. Well, and yes, I agree with you completely. And I think actually it's one of the very, very, and I respect what you're saying. I would hate for anybody that's watching to think I'm about to insult you, but I think that's absolutely right. It's one of the easiest ways to come up with a new idea is to do what I call factor nudging, which is to take something and then just say, well, these are the parameters in which this thing already exists. It is square. What if it wasn't square? What if it was round? What if it was purple? This is opaque. It's a solid. What if it was transparent? What if it was bigger? What if it was smaller? What if it was rubber? What if it was, lots of different ways to change very fundamental basics of extant ideas. By definition, will give you new ideas. Okay. Now, they won't always be so new that they will be useful. Okay. But if you're looking to change 10 to 15 things about any extant idea, and the example that I very often use, one of the strings to my bow or hamstrings, is that I'm a magician. So I think being a magician gives you a certain insight into creativity as well. But one of the things that I find easiest is the massive number of card tricks that are available for magicians to learn and to purchase and to use. It's a very oversaturated area of magic, but there's nothing to stop you taking almost any card trick and saying, well, what if I did it with something else? What if I did it with train tickets?
Oh.
What if I did it with a picture of a pink elephant instead of a queen of hearts? You know, and what if I did it as an observation test? What if I did it with an optician's? Oh, this is I might write this down. What if I did it with an optician's test board, and that was instead of a playing card? There are lots and lots and lots of ways to change very basic ideas, and you've immediately got a new idea.
Yeah, what I found, since I'm not this type of person that sees problems. You know, there's some of these people that say, oh, I got this problem, I'm going to come up with a solution. I don't really think that way. I'm not a very handy guy with tools. I don't fix anything. I don't see problems. So for me, it was all about just changing things. And I want to show another one too, because do you play guitar or anything like that? Do you?
Oh my God, no. The muse Calliope is the only one that's never visited. Okay. I am musically the most appalling.
I don't either, and I don't play guitar. But someone I knew said, "Steve, I want you to come up with new guitar picks." And I said to myself, "Well, what do I know about guitar picks?" Which actually worked in my favor, because I knew, I mean, to me, they could be anything. And so I started coming up with guitar picks and the different shapes of things. And here's one that's in the shape of Mickey Mouse. And I started doing like skulls and monsters, and the only thing that had to be the same was the little tip that would hit the string. So once again, I played games again for me, and it was really an easy exercise, but it was something that I could apply to just all the things that were around me. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I thought it was too hard.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do is make small changes, because I knew those companies it was easier for them to see those small changes and go, yeah, let's do that. Because we're already selling guitar picks, and he just changed it a little bit. We'll probably sell more because now they're lifestyle.
It's a great point. You know, that's something else. I think when you're pitching ideas to people, particularly, that if you've got something that is totally radical, completely out of the box, you have never seen anything like it. Well, you know what? You'd have a much harder job getting investment for something like that, because a lot of people can't see how they can't see how that's going to make them money. So in toys and games, which is one of the areas which I'm busiest in, it's very difficult when you're pitching an idea. You've got to remember, you know, that there's somebody that invented the one of the most popular card games in the world. It's called Dobble. I'm sure you've heard of it. You have to match these shapes real quick. And what is it? Well, they're not going to. A company that's backing that kind of game isn't going to say, you know what? Let's back this totally radical, untried idea from a complete novice who's passionate about one idea that they've had. They can go and do Dobble late night. They can do a rude version of Dobble and clean up with no risk, none. So I think a lot of the time, people who set their sights on having a really radical idea and torture themselves over that, they're barking up the wrong tree, I think, from the word go. No, I mean, of course, there are some times where it pays off, but really.
It can. So tell me, what are some of the tips that you would leave someone today of some of the things that are in your book? What are some of the tips that you could say, look, if you want to make it a habit, you said, I like that word habit, because I do think, I call it the creative muscle that you have to exercise, but it's really about the habit too. You're right. You have to make a habit out of this. Explain that a little bit more. And what other tips would you give someone that thinks they're creative, but they could be better?
That's an excellent question. I think the number one thing, and I can either talk about this for an hour or I can give you like a minute summary, which is what people really prefer. But I really think it's so easy to explain, and it sounds so boring. It's the advice that nobody wants, because powerful though it is, people just go, well, yeah, obviously, I already do that. And they do it, but do they really do it? That's always my question. And the first thing I would say is write everything down.
Okay.
Everything. And I don't mean type it. I don't mean record it. I mean write it with a pen. There are plenty of studies that show how powerful it is for the human brain to write as opposed to type. When you're typing, you're just picking letters, but those letters don't belong to you. You're not forming those letters. You're doing this over and over again, and you're doing that when you talk. But when you pick up a pen and you physically write, that is your brain making that happen. So you're effectively pushing an idea that you've had physically somewhere and you're recording it. So yes, of course, you're better able to remember the idea when you've written it down, which is one thing you get quite a lot of people will say, well, I have an idea this morning, I forgot what it was. Could you write the damn thing down? What are you coming to me for? This is not rocket science for me. This is the most obvious thing in the world. Write it down. So writing it down is the most obvious benefit of making something, of keeping a notebook. The second thing is it processes things more thoroughly. It's a much deeper psychological process to own the idea and to physically write it. And the third thing, which is tremendously easy to overlook, is that when do you ever write things down? When you ever write things down, you ever in a history of mankind said, that's trivial, it's nonsensical, I don't give a monkeys about it, I'll write it down. You only write down things that are important, right? So it makes sense that if you keep writing down your ideas, you're effectively training your brain to recognize the importance of ideas. So the more you write down ideas, the more your brain will have ideas. That's as simple as that. I'm going to write my idea down and I'm reinforcing the importance of ideation. And that is also true then when you come back to that notebook and you read through it again and you say, oh yeah, that was a great idea. You're surprised by it, right? You probably had that. Oh, that was a great idea. Remember this. If you weren't writing it down, you lose the opportunity to have that moment where you read it back and fall in love with the idea again. So I think keeping a notebook, it's obvious advice. And anytime, I'm just astounded by how many people say they want to be more creative and then they don't do it. It astounds me. So that's the boring one, and it's a really boring one. But I think it's absolutely the most important thing you could possibly do. And if everybody wanted to tune out now, don't. But if they wanted to, they would do well to just do that and nothing else for a few months. And they would quickly see how powerful it is to write ideas physically in a notebook, which I carry everywhere, by the way. Always got a notebook on me. It's embarrassing.
Is there something that people can do? Do you have to, I mean, we talked about you don't want to wait for inspiration to hit or that aha moment to wait. Is there anything that you could recommend people to get in the right frame of mind? Because I do think sometimes you have to plan that, schedule that sometimes, or carve out that time, that it's your time. See, to me, I tell everybody, look, business is hard. Business is tough. And I say, do some of the hard stuff, get that out of the way and reward yourself with this freedom of no noise. I can go anywhere. I can do whatever I want. I can find my magic. I can find my magic spot or whatever I'm going to do. Is there any way you could, what do you feel about that? Because I don't think it's something that people really say, this is what I'm going to do.
Well, do you know what? I think that's a really fascinating thing. And there are two sides to that, because I think if you are in the habit of coming up with ideas, you're absolutely right. You probably would have noticed that there are times of the day where you are more inclined to have ideas. There are places where you're more inclined to have ideas. And one of the companies for whom I work a lot, Mojo Nation, which I'm sure you know, Billy Langsworthy over at Adam Butler over at Mojo Nation, they do some terrific work with toy and game inventors. And the advice that we've got, we always interview toy and game inventors, and the advice that they sometimes give is that when I'm in the bath or in the shower, as if it's just them. And I love it because it makes me chuckle. They say, well, you know what, here's the when I'm in the shower, I have ideas. Well, of course you do. Almost everybody has different ideas in the shower than what they had in bed and what they have when they're on the drive. You're in a different state of mind in different places. So you're always accessing different frames of mind. And when you've become a little bit experienced with creativity, you start to notice the pattern. I have most of my good ideas in the morning and I have them in the shower. Terrific. Then always have a shower and always have it in the morning. There we go. That's done. But to answer the broader question, if somebody has not yet got to the point where they've recognized patterns in their creative output, then almost the exact opposite is true, that you can be anywhere without having carved out a space.
Okay.
And the question that I always ask and think is fascinating to ask people to ask themselves is this: how does this relate to my ideas? How does this relate to it? And the best example of that, this is a couple of years ago now, I was on a plane to New York Toy Fair with Billy from Mojo. And I said, we booked to do a talk. And I said, we've got to come up with an example of this work in process. And we sat there and said, oh, we need something that's really quick, really simple, just a name for a game, just something like that. As a stewardess walked past us, she said, such and such and such is like a bull in a china shop. And she carried on her way. And I nudged Bill and I said, write that down, bull in a china shop. If you can't see bull in a china shop as the name of a children's game, get out of the business. It's too easy. And it doesn't also have to be a children's game. That could be a card game. That could be an adult game. It could be an after dark game where it's very rude. But it's because we're in the habit of saying to ourselves all the time, how does this relate to what we're working on? Now, if we sit there and we're concentrating, if people sit there and they concentrate on their problems and what they're working on, they're always saying, I need to do this, I need to do this. You are tuning out everything that could put a new thought in your head. This is why people find they get creative block. They're looking only at the problem. Whereas if you think about what creativity is in terms of what the brain is doing, it's connecting a thought over here with a thought over here, two thoughts that have never connected before. And they have to come together and they have to spark. That's all the brain is doing, is sparking in that way. Well, how can you get more new thoughts in your head? Pay attention and ask, how does this relate to what's going on over here? How does this solve our problem? How does this help us? How does this conversation become a game?
I really love that because... No, I really love that you said that, because looking back when I was doing this, every single day, I would sit there and try to pull it out of my head, but I can only do that for a very limited time. It was just, I needed other input. I needed to see things. I needed to experience things. So I would always do that, get exhausted, and then go someplace, go to the bookstore, go to the mall. I needed to make the dots.
That's exactly the word I use. That's great. Yeah, it's exactly the word I use. You've got dots, and people sort of say, well, you've got to join the dots. That's what creativity is, joining the dots. Okay. So what dots? What the hell are you talking about, dots?
No, you need to make those connections, because I mentioned to you the hippo was when I was working on the basketball game, when I went down there and I saw this children's book with the hippo with the mouth open, I go, there it is. That's the dot. Okay. So, so you've got, what's your latest book? I want to talk about your latest book you got out right now. What is it?
Well, the book that you're probably referring to is this one here. It's The Snakes and Ladders of Creative Thinking. Terrible title, but the subtitle's very good. Have more ideas for board games, improve them, and get them ready to pitch. I can put it there, you can put a picture up. Yep. Snakes and Ladders of Creative Thinking, have more ideas for board games, improve them, and get them ready to pitch. And what we found when we were not only interviewing a lot of professional and semi-professional inventors, and indeed first-time inventors, we were finding, when I was reading Bill's interviews, that lots and lots and lots of inventors talk, and they're fascinating to me. Very few of them say, and I use this technique. They don't identify that they're using a habit. But everything they say tells me that they are. So I said to Bill, why don't we scoop up maybe 20 interviews, maybe 25, I don't know how many it is, put them in the back of a book, and in the front half of the book, I explain all of the techniques that people are using. And funnily enough, I think by far and away, the most spoken about technique is what we're talking about, input and output. You've got to have the input going on. You've got to have that. Most inventors don't necessarily realize they're doing it, which is why they think so little of it. I'll just tell you one other tip quite quickly that I spoke about yesterday. I haven't spoken about it for ages and ages and ages ago. I used to be quite embarrassed to do this. But I used to go to trade shows when we had trade shows. Do you remember?
They're coming back. Wait a minute, they're coming back. Go ahead.
Soldier on, folks. It'll happen. Trade shows, I remember. But I used to go to trade shows without knowing what they were. I would just turn up at Earl's Court, which is a very big one just outside London. I would rock up at Earl's Court exhibition centre without knowing what was on. I had no interest in the subject, but I would turn up and whatever was on, I would pay my entry fee and I would go in. Because if I've got a subject which doesn't interest me, I've never heard of, or I'm not experienced in it at all, by definition, as soon as I'm through those doors, I'm going to be learning a load of stuff that I didn't know. Now, most of it's going to be useless. But some of it is going to spark a thought that sparks a thought, or it's going to sit in my brain until it sparks a thought. And I used to do that quite routinely. I mean, most weekends I used to go to trade shows in which I had no interest and just mooch around. I went to a chocolate show where I found out about how they make 3D sculptures in chocolate and how they carve it and cut it. And that came in very useful. I made a video that was sweets based for a client. We animated sweets and I had to make all the stuff myself. I went to a plastics show, which I thought this is going to be the dullest thing that's ever happened. My God, this can't be interesting. And I went upstairs and I learned about UV resins and plastic glues and how you stick this to. Oh my God. I've never been so shocked at how much I didn't know about a subject as that show. And if they did another one, I'd be there like that. I couldn't wait to get back to the plastics show.
I do believe everybody you're watching this today, I think what's really amazing, what I walked away was that you have to get out. You have to observe. You have to do things maybe you're new or different. And you've heard this before. Take a different route to work or go someplace that you're seeing something new for the first time. So everybody, I want to thank Deej for coming out all the way from London. I also want to say, if you want to be more creative and you want to learn from others, please pick up the book, Creative Thinking. I love it. I do believe you can always improve, and you have to realize that this is something you have to embrace. You're always going to learn, and you're always going to pick up techniques to be better. You want to be the best you can at being creative. So pick up the book. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I'm so happy to meet you, by the way.
It's a pleasure. I can't wait to do it in the flesh. I'm looking forward to when the world opens up and we can have these conversations in human contact, flesh, actual person to person. But until then, what a pleasure. This has been so much fun. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much. And everybody, subscribe down below. We'll see you the next time. This is Stephen Key at InventRightTV. Thanks.